Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the heart of Los Angeles, where the sun never stopped kissing the enormous cityscape, the Forrester family's drama unfolded like a tapestry stitched with strands of love, betrayal, and tragedy. Will Spencer, a young man caught up in the tornado of his family's legacy, stood on the verge of a revelation that would shatter the fragile world he had worked so hard to keep together. The confession came from Remy, a buddy he believed he knew, a man whose easy grin and quick wit had always looked like a safe haven in the midst of Will's chaotic life. But now those words, "She slept with me, too," hung in the air like a guillotine, ripping away Will's faith in both Remy and Luna, the woman he loved. Will's life was never straightforward. Will, the son of Bill Spencer, a publishing titan, and Katie Logan, a woman whose strength was only equaled by her vulnerability, had grown up in the shadow of wealth and power. The Forrester and Spencer families' history were entwined, forming a complicated web of friendships and rivalries that defined Los Angeles' elite. Will had always felt the weight of his heritage, the pressure to keep the Spencer name while navigating the emotional minefields of his parents' volatile relationship. But Luna, beautiful, enigmatic Luna, had been his refuge, his true north in a world that frequently felt out of control. They had met at a charity event organized by Forrester Creations, the fashion business that was as much a part of Will's existence as his own blood. Luna was a newcomer to the scene, a designer with a quiet intensity and talent that had gained the attention of Ridge Forrester himself. Her dark eyes spoke a narrative that we'll long to understand, and her laughter was a song that drowned out the chaos of his life. They fell in love swiftly and strongly, the type of love that seemed capable of conquering anything. Will had faith in them, that they could establish a future together, free from the turmoil that seemed to follow his family like a shadow. But the shadow had discovered them. Remy, with his dazzling grin and effortless confidence, had become a friend of both Will and Luna. He was a photographer who was always present to record the sparkle and glamour of Forrester's runway displays, and he had a way of making everyone feel as if they were the only ones in the room. Will had trusted him, welcomed him into their circle, and shared drinks and secrets late into the night. He had no idea Remy's charm was a mask concealing a betrayal sharper than a dagger. The revelation occurred on a rainy evening, the kind of night when the city appeared to hold its breath. Will was in Luna's apartment, a small loft packed with sketches and fabric swatches, when Remy arrived unexpectedly. His typical swagger had vanished, replaced by a frantic energy that set Will on edge. Luna was off getting takeout for the three of them, and the silence in the room was thick. Remy walked, his hands deep in his pockets, until he blurted out, "Will, I've got to tell you something." The words "Luna, she slept with me too" struck Will like a physical blow. His mind reeled, attempting to comprehend the incomprehensible. Luna, is she with Remy? This couldn't be true. But Remy's eyes, which are normally full of mischief, were raw with shame, and Will knew it wasn't a lie. The room swirled, and Will's heart, already damaged by years of family conflict, burst open. He wanted to yell and demand answers, but all he could say was a breathless, "When?" Remy's story came out in shards, each one a dagger in Will's chest. It had occurred months prior, during a late-night work session at Forrester Creations. Luna was stressed and overwhelmed by a coming deadline, and Remy was there to offer a shoulder and a glass of wine. Luna had crossed a line in a moment of weakness, as one thing led to another. Remy said that it was one night, and a mistake she regretted instantly. She had begged him not to tell Will, frightened of losing him, and Remy had kept her secret up until now. Will's world tilted. He remembered Luna's smile, how she nestled into him at night, and the promises they had made to each other. Had everything been a lie? He wanted to believe Remy was mistaken, that this was a cruel joke, but the facts were too vivid and true. The image of Luna in Remy's arms blazed into his memory, and he felt nauseous. He stumbled out of the apartment, disregarding Remy's pleas to stay and chat, and stepped into the rain, letting it soak through his clothes as if it could relieve his anguish. When Luna returned, she discovered Will sitting on the stairs outside, soaked and shivering. Her eyes widened with anxiety, but when she grabbed for him, he backed away. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Luna's face crumbled, and Will knew. She didn't need to say anything. Her quiet sufficed as a confession. Tears poured down her cheeks, mixing with the rain, as she attempted to explain. It was a mistake, she explained, a moment of weakness caused by tiredness and insecurity. She adored Will, had always loved him, and would do anything to make things right. But Will could not hear her. The words were only noise, overshadowed by the roar of his anguish. He remembered his parents and how many times he had witnessed their love disintegrate under the weight of lies and betrayal. He had vowed to be different, to create something genuine and long-lasting. But now he was standing in the ruins of another shattered commitment. He turned and walked away, leaving Luna sobbing in the rain, her apologies echoing throughout the lonely street. The days that followed were a haze of anguish and rage. Will plunged himself into his work, hoping to bury his emotions in the pandemonium of Spencer publications. But every calm moment brought Luna's face back to him, her laughter, her touch, and the way she had made him feel complete. He loathed her for what she had done, but he hated himself even more for still loving her. He avoided Remy, reluctant to confront the man who had been both his friend and betrayer. The city, once bright and active, now felt like a prison, with every corner evoking recollections of what he had lost. Luna attempted to contact me by leaving voicemails and SMS, which I deleted without reading. But one day, a letter arrived, penned in her distinctive script. Despite his better judgment, he opened it. Luna emptied her heart out inside, using the night with Remy as a confession of her own brokenness rather than an excuse. She expressed her worry of failing, of not being enough for Will or the world they lived in. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just wanted a chance to make things right and prove that their love was worth fighting for. Will read the letter repeatedly, each word tugging at the tattered edges of his heart. He wanted to detest her and go on, but he couldn't. He remembered the nights they spent thinking of a future together and how she believed in him when he doubted himself. He reflected on his parents' love, how it had withstood betrayals and emerged stronger. Can he and Luna do the same? Or was the hurt too deep, the trust too fractured? He ended up at Forrester Creations one evening, standing outside Luna's studio. The lights were turned on, and through the window he saw her crouched over a sketch, her face etched with tiredness and sadness. For a brief moment, he was back at the gala, meeting her for the first time and feeling the spark that had altered everything. He wasn't sure if he could forgive her or ever trust her again. But as he observed her, he knew he wasn't ready to let go just yet. Will knocked on the door, and when Luna opened it, her eyes widened with surprise. They stood there, the weight of their shared history resting on them. "I don't know if we can fix this," Will remarked, his voice rough. "But I'm here." Luna cried again, but this time there was a gleam of hope in her eyes. They had no answers, no idea what the future contained. But in that moment, they opted to confront the anguish together, to test if love could fix the damage caused by treachery. The city flowed on around them, its lights gleaming in the darkness, a reminder that life goes on even in the face of tragedy. Will and Luna's narrative was far from ended, but they planned to write it together, one painful, hopeful step at a time. Will sat in the dark light of his living room, the drapes pulled tightly against the outside world. The silence pressed down on him like a heavy hand, interrupted only by the faint rhythm of his own breathing. He continued replaying Remy's comments in his head, each syllable slashing deeper into his chest, causing scars he thought would never heal. "She slept with me, too." The words were simple, almost casual, but they had the impact of a crashing ball. Will laughed briefly when he first heard them. Not because it was amusing, but because the ridiculousness was too much for him to accept seriously. He assumed Remy was joking, and that it was one of those horrible pranks that old friends used to play on each other when the night was thick with wine and honesty. Remy's face was pale, his jaw stiff, and his eyes avoided Will's, as if he were hiding from himself. There was no humor. Luna had been Will's anchor for many years. She wasn't perfect. She was restless, unpredictable, and frequently unreachable even when sitting next to him. But she was his. Or so he had believed. The nights they shared, the whispered promises under the stars, the trembling hands clutched firmly as if the world would tear them apart. All of it was now on uncertain ground. He recalls the first time he saw Luna. She had been laughing, the type of laugh that made people turn, not because it was loud, but because it was genuine. A chuckle that seemed to encompass every color in the world. Will had fallen in love instantaneously, and despite life's lessons to be cautious with his heart, she made him reckless. They'd created something fragile together, relying on phrases like trust and forever. Now, forever seemed like a terrible joke. Will poured himself another drink, even though he could barely taste the harshness. His hands shook as he placed the glass down, his thoughts slithering like shadows through every recollection. Luna's late nights, the times she avoided his eyes, and the fact that her phone was always face down on the table. At the time, he had dismissed it. He wanted to trust her justifications, to believe that love could overcome uncertainty. But Remy, his best buddy, the one person he trusted with things he hadn't even told Luna, shattered that conviction with a single revelation. The betrayal was twofold. It was not only Luna. It was Remy. The man who once carried Will home after he drank too much at 22, who stood alongside him as his father's coffin was lowered into the ground, and who swore allegiance in the kind of brotherhood that didn't require blood to feel genuine. That man had gone beyond what Will could have imagined. Will attempted to imagine how it happened. He despised himself for even attempting, but his thoughts would not stop. Was it swift and careless? Was it planned? Did Luna whisper the same sweet words to him as she had before? Did Remy look into her eyes the way he used to, or still did? The questions gnawed at him, making the air thicker and his chest tighter. When Luna entered through the door later that night, Will looked at her as if she were a stranger. She set her keys on the counter, gave him a slight grin, and inquired whether he had eaten. Normal words, spoken in the same voice that had always brought him comfort, now sounded empty and brittle. He wanted to yell. He wished to demand the truth. But instead, he simply looked, for the truth had already been revealed, and it was worse than any deception. Why? He eventually mumbled, barely getting the word out of his lips. Luna froze, detecting something in his tone. She glanced at him, first confused, then terrified, as his eyes refused to let her go. Why what? She inquired, but her tone faltered. You and Remy, Will replied, louder but yet frail.
Why?
Her face was robbed of color. Her lips parted briefly, as if to refute it, but no denial emerged. Instead, she lowered her eyes to the floor, and the long, excruciating, unending stillness was enough of a response. Will felt something within him crack. It wasn't just wrath or grief. It was the silent collapse of a foundation based on trust that was never actually strong enough to stand. He got up from his chair, passed past her without saying anything, and left the home. He had no idea where he was heading, except that staying there would ruin him. The night was cold, and the streets were vacant. Will strolled aimlessly, each stride taking him deeper into memories he didn't want yet couldn't shake. He recalled the road trips he and Luna had taken, singing along to tunes on the radio with the windows down. He recalled the nights he and Remy drank cheap beer by the fire, sharing dreams they thought no one else could understand. All those moments felt stolen, tainted by the awareness of betrayal lurking beneath them. Days progressed into weeks. Will ignored them both, rejecting phone calls and shutting out the outside world. He lived in a haze, working just enough to get by, sleeping too little and drinking too much. Grief is peculiar, he discovered. It wasn't like mourning death, but it seemed near. It was mourning a version of his life that never truly existed, lamenting lost trust, and mourning love shared with someone else when he felt it belonged solely to himself. Remy came knocking on his door one night. Will unlocked it because he was too exhausted to pretend he wasn't at home. Remy's eyes were bloodshot, his cheeks thinner, and his voice shook as he continued, "I apologize. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know it wasn't what you believe." Will laughed bitterly. "Didn't it mean what I thought? You slept with her, Remy. You." Remy's lips trembled as he spoke this. "That was a mistake. One I'll regret until the day I die." "A mistake?" Will spit. "Do you realize what you have done? You destroyed everything. You and her both. And all you can say is mistake." He slammed the door before Remy could respond, then stood there with his forehead pushed against the wood, tears streaming down his cheeks. Forgiveness seemed inconceivable, as did carrying the weight of hatred forever. Time, as it always does, moved on. Seasons passed, and life outside his damaged heart bloomed and faded as if nothing had occurred. Will learnt to live with the anguish. Sometimes it was a whisper, and other times it was loud enough to drown him. He avoided spots he had previously visited with Luna, as well as the streets he and Remy used to walk. He became a ghost of the guy he once was, roaming through a world that no longer seemed like his. But beneath the pain, a calm strength developed. He began writing again, something he hadn't done since he was a child. He spent late nights writing about every wound, betrayal, and destroyed dream. The words did not totally heal him, but they did allow the agony to exist outside of his chest. He never returned to Luna. He never spoke with Remy again. Some wounds, he learned, were not supposed to close nicely. They left wounds that revealed stories of survival, mistaken trust, and broken hearts. However, scars, no matter how hideous, indicated that he had endured. Years later, when questioned about love, Will smiled weakly, the type of grin that conveys both remembrance and sorrow. He did not tell them everything. He did not say Luna's or Remy's names. He simply stated, "Love may be the most beautiful deception, but sometimes living the deception teaches you more about yourself than accepting the truth ever could." In the silence of his empty house, with pages of his sorrow sprawled across the table, Will experienced a weird kind of calm. Not happiness yet, but peace. A gentle reminder that even damaged hearts may beat, even if every echo of the past cries of betrayal.